Case file opens. The Steakhouse investigation. According to official records, the first formal entry in the case is dated on a Tuesday at 11:42 a.m., when a health inspector logged an atypical odor in the rear storage corridor of a popular steakhouse. The inspector noted compliant refrigeration temps, clean prep surfaces, and a spotless grill line, then paused the checklist, stepped outside to place a call, and requested assistance from law enforcement and the coroner's office. The establishment, long praised for its smoked ribs and friendly service, operated under a valid license and had passed prior routine inspections. The owner of record, Mateo F., age withheld pending further inquiry. What happened next does not submit to any logic. Because logic expects health code violations to end in citations, not in body bags. Patrol units arrived at 12:07 p.m. The owner, cooperative and composed, consented to a walkthrough. Officers documented normal front-of-house operations, steady lunch service, a full chalkboard of specials, staff in assigned positions, and then followed the inspector to the back. There, the atypical odor sharpened into something a professional recognizes before words arrive. The alley door, hinged tight, showed scuffing at K-height on the inside. A heavy, lidded bin sat to the right of the drain, tagged for Thursday disposal. According to official records, a rapid response coroner team performed a preliminary assessment on site. No graphic details are recorded here. The salient point is procedural. Samples were collected under chain of custody seals. The walk-in, prep tables, smoker, and waste stream were swabbed. Knives and saws were itemized and bagged. 2 stock pots and 1 house sauce container were sealed for analysis. Receipts and delivery logs for the previous 60 days were seized. A handwritten prep schedule, ribs trim 06, specials 9:30, sauce 10. 15 was photographed and logged as Exhibit 7. Word moved faster than paper. Diners were escorted out calmly. Staff were separated for statements. The front door closed under a police notice that used the most neutral language available. Temporarily suspended pending investigation. Neighbors said the owner had a reputation for reliability. Always on time, always smiling, always polite. Inside the ledger of the missing, a different reputation was forming. Travelers who never phoned home. Unhoused residents known to outreach workers who stopped appearing at soup lines. A child whose last known footprints pointed toward the block and then faded. Some believe the truth was buried forever, and it might have remained an ugly rumor, if not for the lab. According to official records, within 48 hours, forensic toxicology reported the presence of human biological markers in multiple food contact samples. A separate forensic biologist confirmed human tissue fragments in trace quantities consistent with meat processing environments. The language in the reports is precise, restrained, and devastating. The district attorney's office authorized a full criminal investigation under statutes covering homicide, abuse of a corpse, fraud, and public endangerment. What the documents show next is organization, a system built under the cover of hospitality. Procurement logs did not align with sales volume. The specials column accounted for mass that ordinary cuts could not explain. A supplier's invoice listed weights that exceeded the throughput of the smoker by a factor the kitchen's timetable could not justify. Security footage, poor angle, good audio, captured the distinct metallic cadence of bone saws after hours on nights when the calendar did not list prep. A maintenance work order, signed by the owner, requested hinge quieting for the rear door. The note read, "Close softly." According to official records, detectives built a timeline around Thursdays, the day the heavy-lidded bin appeared. Waste hauler manifests were subpoenaed. 2 drivers recalled the location for reliable pickups and neatly sealed loads. A 3rd driver, new to the route, remembered a smell he could not name, until the word arrived 2 days later in the newspaper's crime brief. The waste stream was traced to a transfer station. Targeted sorting under warrant recovered material the coroner's office identified as human in origin. Again, no graphic details are included here. The conclusion is clinical. Human remains had entered the restaurant's disposal chain. Witness statements formed a parallel chronicle. A server described specials days as heavier, more lifting, more buckets, more trim than the calendar predicted. A line cook recalled the owner's insistence on certain blades and certain angles, like the manual told him how to cut. A delivery driver noted late-night drop-offs to the rear, signed workshop, cash preferred. None of those details alone prove intent. Together, they drew a map the case could walk. But what happened next defies any logic, because logic insists on intent stated aloud. It rarely is. Intent here lives in patterns, in Thursday bins, in invoices that don't balance, in a smoker's throughput that cheats physics, in soft hinge doors, in prep lists that read like a liturgy. The coroner's preliminary memo included a sentence that did not belong to kitchens, evidence consistent with the introduction of human tissue into food preparation environments. The phrase would later be read in court without raising a voice. According to official records, the owner did not flee. He accepted an invitation to the station, remained courteous, requested coffee, and used his right to keep counsel delayed. When asked what patrons liked most about his food, he said they liked eating it. The recorder clicked. The detective paused. Outside, a queue still formed in habit, then broke apart under the yellow tape's arithmetic. Inside, the case file received a title it did not want but could not refuse: The Steakhouse Human Meat Investigation. Some lines on the timeline remain open: missing persons who may never be connected, deliveries that will never be fully traced, receipts that will always be cash. But the chronicle has begun. 8 blocks will tell it: the routine inspections that failed to alarm, the pins on the map that drifted toward a single kitchen, the lab reports that cut through smoke, the statements that wavered then steadied, the charge sheet that learned new weight. The door has closed on lunch service. The record has opened, and the city, reading its own files, will have to learn what it means to have liked, without knowing what it was eating. Chain of custody, samples, warrants, and a map that tightened. According to official records, every swab, scrap, and liquid pull from the kitchen, smoker, prep tables, drain line, and lidded bins was sealed under uninterrupted chain of custody. Each pouch carried a timestamp, initials, and a tamper-evident seal number. The same afternoon, investigators seized shift logs, 60 days of invoices, POS roll-ups, the specials prep schedule, and waste manifests. The owner, identified as Mateo F., confirmed access to all front-of-house areas and denied the presence of any non-food materials in the rear corridor. 48 hours later, the first lab memos arrived. Multiple food contact swabs contain human biological markers. A separate forensic biology report noted trace human tissue consistent with meat processing environments. The language stayed clinical, but it was enough for the district attorney to open a criminal file under statutes for homicide, abuse of a corpse, fraud, and public endangerment. But what happened next does not submit to any logic, because logic expects a single red flag, not a system. A financial stock audit showed official cuts purchased and meals sold did not reconcile with the observed output. The specials column accounted for excess mass that the smoker could not realistically process at the listed timings. 3 supplier invoices carried suspicious weights with cash notations. A maintenance work order, owner's signature, requested rear door hinge quieting with the note, "Close softly." According to official records, a magistrate issued warrants, expanded premises search, seizure of digital media, CCTV and VR, POS server, and production of waste hauler route sheets. 2 drivers described the pickup as reliable Thursdays, neatly sealed, heavier than standard loads. A third, new to the route, recalled the smell he couldn't square with a kitchen. The waste stream was traced to a transfer station. Targeted sort under warrant recovered material the coroner's office identified as human in origin. No graphic details are included in the public file. The conclusion remained clinical. Human remains had entered the restaurant's disposal chain. The missing persons unit overlaid its pins. Travelers, unhoused residents, a handful of locals, disparate jurisdictions, converged on a hot square around the Steakhouse block. Analysts generated a coincidence list. Thursday specials, specific vendor deliveries, nights when the rear hall camera's audio picked up the metallic cadence of bone sawing despite no prep scheduled. A separate ward authorized staff buccal swabs and fingerprints, voluntary or compelled, to exclude incidental contamination. Witness statements formed a parallel chronicle. A server described specials days as heavier, more buckets, more trim than the calendar predicted. A line cook recalled the owner's insistence on specific blades and cut angles, like the manual told him how. A consumables supplier flagged out-of-band orders of disposable gloves and knife blades between inspections. None of these details alone proved intent. Together, they began to map behavior. According to official records, 2 stockpots and 1 container of house sauce were sealed and rushed for analysis. Forensic chemistry reported a protein spectrum in which several components were compatible with human origin. The report's wording was cautious but prosecutable, evidence consistent with the introduction of human tissue into a food preparation environment. Defense counsel answered with possible cross-contamination. The DA secured blind retests at 2 independent labs. But what happened next defies any logic, because the defense bet on lab error and got confirmation, twice. Digital forensics then restored audio from silent rear hall video, the distinctive metal rhythm of saws during an hour not marked for prep. Internal notes surfaced a handwritten line. Foo, takeout. Night, no noise. Some believe the truth was buried forever, and some of it will remain cash and handshake. Yet the web condensed. Thursday bins, quiet hinges, invoice anomalies, a smoker throughput that cheated physics, a drift line of disappearances inside a few blocks. Investigators obtained another warrant, off-site storage tied to Mateo F. Keys, contracts, payment records. 1 unit held a damp cardboard box, a cassette recorder, 2 tapes, and a small stack of paper plates with balloon rims. The tapes, when monitored, carried ambient fan hum and a periodic click compatible with a lighting dimmer. On, off, on, off. According to official records, the owner remained cooperative, but his answers turned evasive on core points. Menu is beef, pork, poultry. Any other claim is slander. When a detective asked, "What did patrons like so much about your food?" he said, "They liked eating it." After interim lab results were disclosed, the DA drafted an initial charge package: homicide, counts TBD, abuse of a corpse, consumer fraud, endangering the public, obstruction. By week's end, analysts completed a Thursday timeline: hauler routes, POS spikes, glove blade packaging purchases, and cell site pings, placing the owner along intracity loops that folded back to the alley. The pattern returned with a weekly accuracy that felt mechanical. The missing persons map gained a new layer: last seen, probable direction of travel, and its arrows laid themselves uncomfortably over a menu header. According to official records, detectives petitioned for an arrest warrant with immediate residential search authority. The affidavit summarized probable cause to believe human tissue was introduced into food products, and evidence has been destroyed, obscured. The operation plan called for coroner presence, crime scene techs, food safety specialists, and a cadaver dog. The next block will log what the house search recovered, and how the dining room's cleanliness ceased to be persuasive the moment the back of house was read as evidence. The house that read like evidence. According to official records, the arrest and residential search executed at 06:12 a.m. followed a standard knock and announce. The suspect, identified as Mateo F., opened the door, complied with commands, and was secured without incident. A coroner's investigator, crime scene technicians, a food safety specialist, and a cadaver dog team entered under a single warrant packet. Premises, vehicles, outbuildings, and digital media. The front rooms presented as meticulous: vacuum tracks in parallel lines, mail stacked by postmark, a kitchen staged for catalog photography rather than cooking. The change began in the utility corridor. The dog alerted twice at the threshold drain and once along a baseboard seam leading to the garage. HVAC registers in the hallway returned swabs of interest. Classification later upgraded after lab confirmation. A wall calendar bore only Thursdays circled, annotated in pencil. Specials, hall, quiet. In the garage, according to official records, techs located a contractor table, an assortment of blades and sharpening stones, and a compact bandsaw with recently replaced bearings. All metal surfaces were luminol screened and swabbed. A coil of sound-dampening foam, retail rolls, uncut, sat beside a box of replacement door hinges labeled Silent Close. Purchase receipts recovered from a clipboard matched dates already flagged in the restaurant audit. In a locked cabinet, disposable gloves, industrial grade, butcher paper in bulk, zip ties, and a pack of single-use boot covers. None of those items are illegal. In context, they became vocabulary. Digital seizure proceeded in parallel. Technicians imaged 2 phones, one daily driver, one prepaid, a home router, a laptop, and an external USB drive labeled Recipes. The recipes volume contained formatted cards for standard sauces and rubs, and a separate folder of spreadsheets titled Yield. The columns: date, weight in, weight out, loss percent, extra, aligned eerily with the anomalies in supplier invoices. Timestamps placed updates late at night on Wednesdays and Thursdays. But what happened next does not submit to any logic, because logic expects homes to contradict suspicion, not rhyme with it. A narrow closet off the utility room was fitted with aftermarket weather strip and a commercial sweep, overkill for linens. Inside, a portable cooler cart, empty, recently bleached, spare thermometer probes, and a small whiteboard listing thorough loadout with checkboxes. In the laundry area, trap swabs were taken and sealed. A cadaver dog alert at the washing machine gasket was recorded, and the gasket itself was collected as evidence. The homeowner's vehicle, a panel van registered to a Shell DBA, contained a torsion bar, a dolly, bundled contractor trash bags, and a folded privacy screen. According to official records, preliminary lab work began returning while the scene was still being processed. One of the residential HVAC swabs matched the human biomarker profile that had triggered the restaurant investigation. Trace particulates recovered from the garage bandsaw housing produced a mixed profile. Subsequent differential extraction isolated a human component consistent with earlier food contact hits. A warrant addendum authorized buccal swabs from the suspect to exclude or include him in mixtures. Defense counsel observed collection. The interview started at 11:03 a.m. in a standard room. Camera on. Clock visible. Miranda read and waved with counsel's caveat. Subject retains right to pause. The suspect remained courteous. He described himself as a perfectionist and fanatic about waste reduction. When asked to explain the yield spreadsheets, he used vocabulary from restaurant webinars: shrink, trim, moisture loss. Confronted with Thursday correlations, bins, purchases, route sheets, POS spikes, he said, "That's production day." When asked why door hinges had to be silent, he answered, "Neighbors appreciate quiet." The cadence never changed. Some believe the truth was buried forever, and parts of it will remain layered in cash sales and unregistered numbers. But digital forensics is a stubborn reader. The prepaid phone, powered down on contact, revealed call activity to 3 numbers saved only as emojis. Prosody, end of speak. 1, tied to a defunct contractor mailbox, connected the Shell DBA to storage units already searched. Another pinged near an interstate exit the missing persons map had highlighted as a last seen cluster. The third mapped to a salvage yard whose owner later produced a handwritten receipt from Misk Metal, cash, dated a Thursday. According to official records, the DA's office convened a multi-agency huddle that evening: homicide, missing persons, consumer protection, public health. They adopted a joint evidence log to avoid silo drift. The coroner's office expanded its memorandum. Multiple independent specimens from residential HVAC, garage equipment, and laundering environment show human biological material, consistent with prior findings from commercial premises. Forensic chemists added a cautious but crucial line about the seized house sauce: a repeated protein signature compatible with human origin, corroborated by 2 independent labs. A financial subpoena to the Shell DBA's bank returned deposits aligning with Thursday service revenue, yet preceded by Wednesday cash withdrawals at an ATM without camera coverage. The pattern suggested an input stream not reflected in legitimate vendor invoices. The router image revealed a home NAS share with a folder named Workshop. Metadata placed connections between the house and the restaurant after midnight on multiple Wednesdays. A wiped then recovered note fragment on the laptop stated, "Close softly, no Thursday noise. Prosody? Speak. Prosody rate -2%, pitch -1. What happened next defies any logic, because logic expects an admission to meet the data. It did not. It didn't meet the data. In a second interview session, the suspect invoked counsel mid-question, and the tape paused. Before it did, he offered the same sentence he'd given at the restaurant: 260 pics. People liked eating it. The detective let the silence record. Outside, a search team executed the vehicle warrant. A second van located at a rented lockup. A cadaver dog alerted twice at the rear threshold. Inside, techs recovered a clipboard with route sketches, a box of nitrile gloves, size L, 2 rolls of butcher paper, A stained, a 2020 A, 2 rolls of butcher paper, and a stained floor mat that lab later classified positive for human biomarker. Family reference samples from 2 open missing person files were submitted with court approval. Results were pending, but a mitochondrial screen indicated potential relatedness signals in mixed trace recovered from the bandsaw. Housing. The DA's affidavit for a no-bond hold cited risk of evidence destruction and community danger, grounded in credible evidence that human tissue was introduced into food products. Witness outreach widened. An unhoused outreach worker provided dates a client stopped appearing. They aligned with a Thursday, after late prep, a detail placed in a supplemental report. A neighbor recalled a new exhaust fan tone from the restaurant alley on 2 quiet weeks when the smoker had supposedly been down for maintenance. The city's hotlines filled with memory fragments. Investigators triaged without feeding rumor. Some believed the truth was buried forever. Yet the record kept surfacing small, insistent consistencies. Thursday circles on a wall calendar yield cells that reconciled to nothing but themselves. Doors tuned to close like apologies. By night's end, the DA finalized a first-wave charge sheet. Homicide, counts to be amended as identifications mature. Abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, consumer fraud, reckless endangerment, and maintaining a public nuisance. According to official records, the suspect was booked at 22:11. Property logged, prints taken, buckle swab sealed. A preliminary hearing date was set. The restaurant remained shuttered under health and criminal holds. Public Health issued a bulletin advising prior patrons to contact a hotline for counseling and medical guidance. The next block will document the charging conference, early motions from the defense, and the first public accounting. A courtroom where the menu, the ledger, and the map of Thursdays will be forced to sit side by side. Paper, bench, and public health. According to official records, the charging conference convened at 08:30 in a windowless room that smelled faintly of toner. Homicide, missing persons, consumer protection, public health, and the coroner's office placed their folders on the same table and agreed on one calendar: Thursdays. The district attorney's draft sheet listed counts in pencil first: homicide, counts TBD, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, consumer fraud, reckless endangerment, maintaining a public nuisance. Then inked them after lab counsel confirmed that 2 independent facilities had replicated the human origin compatible protein signature from food contact surfaces and the seized house sauce. A magistrate set a no-bond hold at the initial appearance, citing community danger and risk of evidence destruction, and ordered expedited discovery with a protective order for victim identifying information. Defense counsel objected to the phrase human tissue in open court. The judge allowed it, noting it appears verbatim in forensic memoranda. The arraignment transcript is plain. Name, rights, charges, plea, not guilty. The defendant's posture remained composed. The gallery breathed, then remembered to stop. But what happened next does not submit to any logic because logic expects courtroom ritual to close distance. It didn't. Outside, Public Health issued Bulletin 10A, a hotline for prior patrons, counseling resources, and a recommendation for medical consultation for those experiencing anxiety related to potential exposure. The language avoided sensationalism. It did not avoid gravity. A second bulletin, 10B, reminded the public that no evidence suggested communicable risk from past meals. The risk identified was criminal, not biological. According to official records, a grand jury subpoenaed additional records. Waste hauler manifests for 12 months, vendor ledgers, bank activity for the Shell DBA, and digital images from a seized NVR whose internal clock was 6 minutes slow. A clerk corrected timestamps against router logs. The silent hour on 2 Wednesdays now aligned with audio recovered from the rear corridor. Metal cadence. No voices. The grand jury heard from a forensic accountant who charted cash withdrawals on Wednesdays against Thursday POS spikes and noted a repeating delta not attributable to shrink, spoilage, or seasonal variance. Defense strategy emerged in motions. One sought suppression of residential HVAC swabs as overbroad, arguing the warrant lacked particularity. Another moved to exclude all references to human in pretrial filings as prejudicial rhetoric. A third demanded disclosure of cadaver dog training records. The court scheduled evidentiary hearings. Meanwhile, an agreed protective order sealed names in 2 missing persons cross-matches pending kin notification and confirmatory DNA. Some believed the truth was buried forever, and the file showed why. Names that had lived for months as case numbers now required phone calls with sentences no one learns to say well. Speak, prosody rate -2% pitch. Public records reflect a second courtroom, civil. Break 220 milliseconds, not criminal. A class action notice was drafted on behalf of patrons alleging fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The defendant's insurer reserved rights. Coverage counsel sent a letter that read like architecture. 260 milliseconds. Exclusions. Conditions. Definitions. Definitions. The city moved to revoke the restaurant's license and initiated nuisance abatement for the premises and the registered lockup. 380 milliseconds. The health department posted a red placard at the door. Closed. Health and criminal hold. And a second notice advising employees on wage claims. 380 milliseconds. According to official records, discovery began to move like freight. 380 milliseconds. Chain of custody logs grew. Seal number 041982, rear drain swab. 041997, smoker grate swab. 042011, HVAC register swab. 042020, bandsaw housing particulates. 360 milliseconds. 042043, a lab QA manager certified duplicate seals and blind split protocols to independent facilities. The defense's expert requested bench notes. Copies were provided under a protective order. 380 milliseconds. A later motion would attack the phrase, compatible with human origin, as scientifically vague. The state replied with a glossary. BAME spectra, confidence intervals. The state replied with a glossary. 380 milliseconds. A server received a subpoena with a no contact except via counsel clause after reporters began calling her personal phone. A dishwasher was assigned a victim witness advocate after describing penny smell. Nights in a supplemental interview. End prosody. End. Speak. The unhoused outreach worker who marked a client's last appearance was scheduled for a limited grand jury session to preserve testimony irrespective of trial dates. A defense investigator requested access to staff for voluntary interviews. The DA insisted on counsel present. But what happened next defies any logic. because logic expects numbers to remain neutral. They didn't feel neutral when the coroner's office returned a mitochondrial relatedness signal, preliminarily linking trace from the bandsaw housing to a family reference in one missing person file. The report stressed limits, mixture, low quantity, not probative alone, but prosecutors circled the date anyway. A second lab confirmed the same directional signal. A separate handwriting analyst matched notations on a yield spreadsheet to the suspect's known writing on vendor checks, with high likelihood. The defense retained its own experts and noticed depositions of the state's analysts. According to official records, the court imposed a narrowly tailored gag order. Counsel and law enforcement to speak only through filed pleadings. Public health exempted for notices strictly within its remit. A rumor about mass identifications was addressed in open court. No such determinations exist, the judge said. End of speak. We will proceed on evidence, not rumor. The missing persons unit updated its map layer. Last seen, probable vector. 2 arrows now intersected the alley behind the restaurant on specials Thursdays, clocked within an hour of each other, 3 weeks apart. Digital forensics advanced in small, decisive clicks. The recipe's USB's yield folder contains CSVs with formula cells now restored from previous versions. A column labeled Extra had once read E in older saves. A network log placed the laptop pushing updates to the restaurant POS at 02:11 on a Thursday. The router's DHCP lease showed the same MAC on the house network at 01:54. A scraped note fragment recovered from the prepaid phone read, "Close softly. No Thursday noise." Defense argued context. The court called it admissibility, not weight. Some believe the truth was buried forever, but a grand jury prefers layers to guesses. It returned a true bill. Multiple counts of homicide. Victims John Jane Doe pending identification. Abuse of a corpse. Tampering. Consumer fraud. Reckless endangerment. And maintaining a public nuisance. Bail remained denied. Trial was set on a schedule that felt both fast and glacial. Motions in 60. Fry Daubert in 90. Jury selection penciled at 180. The docket warned both sides. No continuances absent extraordinary cause. According to official records, Public Health opened a counseling clinic 3 nights a week. Attendance exceeded chairs the first evening. A hotline logged calls not for medicine but for memory. I ate there on a Thursday, and staff were trained to document without promising answers the file could not yet give. The city attorney announced an ordinance proposal tightening waste stream tracking for food businesses. Seals, manifests, GPS on haulers. Restaurants groaned. No one testified against it. The defense filed one more motion to strike the phrase "Steakhouse human meat investigation" from state captions. The judge granted it as uninformative surplusage, directing parties to use the case number only. Paper tidied its language. The facts did not. The next block will document the evidentiary hearings, chain of custody challenges, expert admissibility, and how a Thursday routine, bins, hinges, yields, and routes, was made fit for a jury's 12 seats. Making Thursday admissible. According to official records, the evidentiary hearings opened at 9:03 a.m., with chain of custody challenges. Defense counsel moved to suppress 4 categories. 1. Rear drain swabs from the restaurant. 2. HVAC register swabs from the residence. 3. Particulates from the garage bandsaw housing. And 4. The sealed house sauce. The argument was familiar. Overbreadth, broken seals, and laboratory ambiguity. The state called a parade of custodians. Each took the oath, identified their seal logs by number, and walked the court through timestamps, initials, and handoffs. A QC manager testified that duplicate seals and blind splits were used, and that 2 independent labs replicated the key findings. Protein spectrum compatible with human origin, under separate accession numbers. The judge made no speeches. He simply marked exhibits and wrote, slowly, "Foundation satisfied. Next, the defense targeted the cadaver dog alerts: prejudicial, unreliable. The handler produced training logs, certification dates, and deployment reports. Cross-examination pressed on false positives and handler cueing. The state answered with body cam clips, neutral posture, silent signals, and alerts recorded before scene techs knew where to swab. The court admitted the alerts for limited purpose to explain investigative steps, with an instruction that they were not proof of identity or cause. But what happened next does not submit to any logic, because logic expects the science to fight the story. Instead, it framed it. A Frye-Daubert hearing followed on the protein profiling and trace biology methods. 3 experts appeared: a forensic chemist, a molecular biologist, and a lab QA auditor. They described controls, confidence intervals, and error rates that live under glass in journals, more than in headlines. Defense experts labeled the phrase "compatible with human origin" as imprecise. The chemist replied, "It is cautious, by design. It means we avoided over-claiming." The judge ruled the techniques reliable and relevant. Disputes would go to weight, not admissibility. According to official records, digital forensics survived its own hearing. A state examiner laid out the extraction of POS logs, CCTV audio recovery, and the reconstruction of yield CSVs from the USB-labeled recipes. Timestamps were normalized against router logs and DHCP leases. A timeline appeared on the courtroom screens. Wednesdays 23:00 to 00, laptop edits to yield. Thursdays 06:00-14:15, POS spikes. Thursdays 14:00 to 15, waste hauler GPS at the alley. Thursdays 15:30, transfer station scale tickets. Your Honor, defense said. Correlation is not causation. The judge nodded. Jurors will hear that sentence, he said. They'll also hear about inges, bins, and invoices. Witnesses from the Missing Persons Unit then testified to map overlay procedures. A crime analyst explained kernel density clustering and how last seen. Errors converged on the block within Thursday windows. On cross, counsel suggested transient drift could explain the pattern. Redirect introduced 2 local cases, not transient, with last pings within a block radius on separate Thursdays. A protective order kept names sealed. The record used placeholders and timestamps. The map did not look dramatic. It looked organized. Some believed the truth was buried forever, yet small documents kept rising. A waste hauler supervisor produced archived route sheets under subpoena. 2 were annotated, heavy, quiet alley. A salvage yard owner brought a handwritten receipt, misc metal, cash, Thursday date, and identified the purchaser as the Steakhouse man. A maintenance tech testified to installing silent close, hinges at the residence, and hinge quieting at the restaurant back door. None of it said why. It said how. According to official records, the defense gained ground in one narrow corner. A residential trap swab collected after a brief scene pause. A tech admitted the pause occurred before the swab was sealed. The court excluded that single item in an abundance of caution. The ruling did not affect the HVAC swab, bandsaw particulates, or house sauce. The DA, unfazed, pivoted to paper. A forensic accountant walked through cash withdrawals on Wednesdays that preceded Thursday deposits. A pre-financing of inputs not reflected in vendor invoices. The phrase drew an objection, sustained for wording, and was restated as cash flows inconsistent with ordinary purchasing. The court then heard from public health. A medical director summarized bulletins 10A and 10B, the counseling clinic setup, and the hotline intake protocol. The judge instructed jurors in advance of trial that these notices were not evidence of guilt, only context for mitigations. It sounded procedural. It felt like air finding a window. But what happened next defies any logic, because logic expects the defendant's statements to be footnotes. They became fulcrums. A detective played the clipped audio from the initial interview. What did patrons like so much about your food? They liked eating it. The defense objected as contextless flourish. Overruled, admitted as a party admission. In a later recording, The suspect described himself as fanatic about yield. When asked to explain the E column in an older CSV version, he said, "extra." The state did not suggest what extra meant. It simply laid the spreadsheet beside POS and scale tickets. Thursday kept assembling itself. According to official records, the court issued a carefully narrowed gag order modification. Public health could continue notices. Counsel would confine comments to filings. Law enforcement could correct false public rumors that risked safety. A rumor about dozens of identifications was addressed and dispelled on the record. The coroner's office, in a measured memo, reported a mitochondrial relatedness signal in mixed trace from the bandsaw housing to one family reference. The judge permitted the directional testimony with a limiting instruction and prohibited any numerical likelihood ratio at this stage. A final pretrial motion sought to strike the Thursday timeline as narrative scaffolding masquerading as evidence. The judge denied it. "It is evidence," he said, "comprised of logs, GPS, receipts, edits, and manifests. Counsel may attack its inferences." Jury questionnaires were approved. Prior patronage, attitudes toward forensic science, views on circumstantial proof, and whether neatness equals trustworthiness. The last question read like a mirror. Some believe the truth was buried forever, but the record now had a spine. Thursday circles on a wall calendar, a door tuned to close softly, a bin that weighed too much, a smoker that could not do what the receipts claimed it had done, a spreadsheet column that once meant only E, a route sheet that always ended at the same alley. The judge set firm dates. Motions trimmed, exhibits numbered, witness orders exchanged. No continuances absent true emergency. According to official records, the court recessed with a directive to prepare opening statements within 10 days. Outside, a counseling clinic filled its chairs again. Inside, the clerk stacked exhibits in bankers' boxes labeled by week. WED edits, food pos, food waste, lab, food contact, lab residence. The hallway clock clicked. The case, now fitted to rules that measure breadth as well as proof, turned toward a jury that would be asked to decide whether a routine can be a crime, when every hinge, bin, log, and line says Thursday. 12 seats and a routine. According to official records, openings began at 9:01 a.m. The prosecution stood behind a rectangle of exhibits labeled by week. WED edits, thu pos, thu waste, lab food contact, lab residence. The district attorney did not reach for adjectives. She reached for clocks. "You will hear a pattern measured in hours," she said. "Wednesdays past midnight, Thursdays before dusk, and the paperwork that connects those hours to a kitchen." She promised no confession. She promised receipts. Logs and swabs, whose language was clinical and sufficient. The defense asked the jury to do what juries are built to do: resist story and demand proof. Counsel called the state's case a collage of coincidence, arguing that kitchens are loud, waste loads vary, and compatible with human origin is not the same as human. He ran a business, counsel said, and the state mistook efficiency for malice. They warned against fear infections, the tendency of rumor to masquerade as evidence. A defendant sat still, notes aligned, posture unbroken. According to official records, the state's case-in-chief began with chain of custody custodians. They crossed the room one by one, reciting seals and handoffs like coordinates. A lab QA manager explained blind splits to independent facilities, the accession numbers that matched reports, the audit trails that survive cross-examination. The judge sustained 2 foundation objections, overruled 6, and then wrote a short sentence, admitted for weight. Digital forensics took the stand with a timeline. The examiner synchronized the restaurant POS, the house router log, the USB yield edits, and the waste hauler GPS pings. A slide appeared, WED 2342, USB plugged, yield.csv edited. Tuesday 0612. Pause spike. Tuesday, 1407. Holler Alley stop. Tuesday, 1533. Transfer station scale ticket. Defense rose. Correlation is not causation. Redirect added the Hinge invoice stamped THU and a handwritten line from a recovered note. Close softly. The jurors did not look at each other. They looked at the clock. But what happened next does not submit to any logic, because logic expects science to shout. It whispered. A forensic chemist read from a report. Protein spectrum consistent with human origin in multiple food contact swabs and seized house sauce matrix, replicated independently. She explained controls and error rates. Defense pressed. Contamination. Lab drift. Ambiguous phrasing. The chemist conceded caution and reminded the court that caution and reliability are not opposites. The judge instructed, disputes go to wait. According to official records, the missing persons analyst displayed the map layer without names, arrows labeled only by timestamps and distances. Two independent last-seen vectors intersected the alley on separate Thursdays within 1 hour of the hauler's documented stop. Cross suggested transient drift. Redirect noted both were locals, not transient, and introduced cell site pings, narrowing the window. The court permitted the arrows as contextual movement evidence, with a limiting instruction that they did not identify victims. Public health followed for context. The medical director summarized Bulletin 10A, counseling hotline, and 10B, no infectious risk identified. Defense objected as prejudicial atmosphere. Overruled, the notices were admitted for the limited purpose of explaining agency actions and not as proof of guilt. The jury wrote nothing down, but hands tightened on armrests in a way transcripts cannot capture. According to official records, the dishwasher testified about penny smell nights and late wipe-downs on Wednesdays. Cross emphasized inexperience and suggested rust, not blood. The state did not argue back. It laid a photograph of the bandsaw bearings serviced the prior month and moved on. A server described specials days as heavy, more buckets, more trim. Cross floated busy weekends as an alternative. The calendar contradicted the suggestion. A maintenance tech identified his own invoice. Silent close hinges. Residence and rear restaurant door, both Thursdays. Some believe the truth was buried forever, and the storage unit seemed designed to keep it that way. A detective testified to a box seized there, a cassette recorder and 2 tapes. The court had pre-screened the audio and limited its use to ambient sound context, not content proof. Jurors heard a vent fan's hum and a periodic click compatible with a lighting dimmer. On, off, time-stamped on a Thursday. The defense objected to suggestive atmosphere. Overruled with instruction. According to official records, the state introduced the yield spreadsheets. An earlier saved version showed a column formerly labeled E. A later version expanded it to extra. Cross proposed mundane meanings, extra sauce, extra trim. Redirect overlaid the extra spikes with POS totals and hauler weights. The lines stacked like transparent sheets until they looked like a single picture no one had drawn by hand. The defense opened its case with character and doubt. A former vendor called the owner exacting, polite, punctual. On cross, the vendor admitted cash sales off invoice now and then. A former coworker said the defendant hated waste. Cross placed the words next to fanatic about yield from a recorded interview. A defense forensic consultant criticized compatible with human origin as non-probative. The state countered with the independent lab's replication and a glossary that pinned terms to methods. The judge allowed both views and reminded the jury of the burden. But what happened next defies any logic because logic expects mid-trial breaks to be empty. They weren't. During a recess, a bank returned historic ATM footage that had finally been retrieved from cold storage. The camera faced the sidewalk, not the machine. It captured only approach and departure. A Thursday Eve clip showed the defendant walking to an ATM where withdrawals tied to the Shell DBA were logged. A DA sought judicial notice to update the timeline. The court allowed the clip with a stipulation. This shows presence near an ATM. It does not show transactions. According to official records, the defense moved for a directed verdict after the state rested. No corpus delicti without identifications, no intent without a statement. The judge denied the motion. The question of intent may be inferred from conduct. The absence of named victims does not defeat charges framed under Jane Doe counts at this stage. The defense called a microbiologist who posited cross-contamination from handling money, human skin contact. The state answered with cleanroom protocols and negative controls that bracketed positives. A neighbor testified to quiet weeks when the smoker was supposedly down for maintenance, and a new exhaust tone from the alley those same nights. Cross suggested HVAC upgrades. The neighbor shrugged. I heard what I heard. The jury heard the lack of drama. Some believe the truth was buried forever, yet small documents kept surfacing. A salvage yard owner identified the defendant as the man who sold misc metal cash on a Thursday. A waste hauler supervisor explained why Thursday loads were listed heavy, quiet alley. The phrase sounded ordinary until it was read beside hinge invoices and the dimmer's click. According to official records, the defendant did not testify. The court made the standard instruction, no adverse inference. The defense rested on insufficiency and the proposition that neatness is not crime. The state reserved rebuttal and called one final witness, the lab QA auditor, who explained why replication at 2 independent facilities matters more than rhetoric. It does not prove identity, she said. It proves environment. The word hung where juries decide meanings. The court settled instructions, circumstantial evidence, expert testimony, limited purposes, dogs, maps, notices, ambient audio, elements for homicide counts charged under Jane Doe, abuse of a corpse, tampering, consumer fraud, reckless endangerment, nuisance. A line the judge added felt like architecture. Patterns are evidence when built from admissible parts. According to official records, the parties prepared for closings. Exhibits were renumbered in the order the court would allow them to appear on screens. The clerk stacked the banker's boxes by day of week. A bailiff rolled in the cart with the timeline boards. The hallway clock ticked into a Thursday, not on the calendar, but in the room's tempo. But what happened next would belong to argument. The DA would ask 12 people to read a routine as intent. The defense would ask them to see coincidence, contamination, and fear. The record, hinges, bins, edits, pings, seals, would sit between those requests, as inert and heavy as steel. A next block will set the room for closings and the instructions that ask jurors to decide whether a kitchen can be a crime when every Thursday says it can. The hours the record owned. According to official records, closing arguments began at 9:02 a.m. The prosecution did not retell the story. It reassembled the parts. On one board, WED edits USB yield files opened past midnight at the residence. On another, few POS, point of sale spikes before noon. A third, few waste, hauler GPS at the alley, scale tickets by mid-afternoon. Along the bottom, lab memos from 2 independent facilities, each reading the same cautious sentence. Protein spectrum compatible with human origin. For food contact swabs and the seized house sauce. Patterns are evidence when built from admissible parts, the DA said, quoting the court's own instruction. Intent may be read when routine refuses coincidence. The defense answered with restraint. Counsel pointed at each board and said what juries are taught to ask. What is this, by itself? A spreadsheet without a witness to its purpose. A spike without proof of its contents. A bin without an inventory. A phrase compatible with human origin that is cautious because it is uncertain. The state's case is an assembly of maybes, counsel said. Where the law requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, maybes do not add up. They warned against fear arithmetic, the tendency to sum anxiety into guilt. According to official records, jury instructions followed. The court read for nearly an hour, presumption of innocence, burden of proof, direct and circumstantial evidence, expert testimony, limited purposes, cadaver dog alerts to explain investigative steps, map overlays for contextual movement, public health notices to explain agency action, ambient audio to situate time, not content. Elements for homicide counts charged under John Jane Doe placeholders: abuse of a corpse, tampering, consumer fraud, reckless endangerment, and nuisance. The judge included a sentence crafted for this case. You may consider a pattern only to the extent it is composed of evidence admitted for its proper purpose. The jury retired at 1:14 p.m. According to official records, they requested the following exhibits in sequence: 1. The yield CSV earliest and latest versions. 2. The hinge invoices for the residence and restaurant rear door. 3. The waste hauler GPS logs and corresponding scale tickets. 4. The POS summary for Thursdays. 5. The lab memos from both independent facilities. And 6. The wall calendar recovered from the residence showing Thursdays circled. The clerk delivered copies and a laptop with a read-only evidence viewer. But what happened next does not submit to any logic, because logic expects deliberations to be a clock. They are a landscape. The foreperson proposed a grid, counts down the left, exhibits across the top. Boxes were filled with check marks, question marks, and short notes: wait only, context only, limited purpose. A juror with an accounting background penciled columns for source, method, and independently replicated. Another. A machinist underlined 4 items: hinge invoices, bin manifests, bandsaw particulates, and the router logs. These are metal, he said softly. No transcript captures tone. According to official records, at 3:37 p.m., the jury asked for a readback of the Frey-Daubert ruling and the chemist's explanation of why compatible with human origin is cautious rather than vague. The court reporter read the passages: blind splits, accession numbers, error controls, replication. The judge repeated a limiting instruction on the mitochondrial relatedness signal from mixed trace at the bandsaw housing, directional, not identification, to be weighed accordingly. The jury then asked to rehear the defendant's 2 recorded statements. The clip played: "What did patrons like so much about your food? They liked eating it." The second: "Fanatic about yield. No one spoke in the gallery." Some believe the truth was buried forever, and the jury tested that belief against paper and time. They overlaid the WED edits timestamps with router and DHCP logs, placing the laptop at the residence, then at the restaurant before dawn. They aligned Hugh Pass surges with kitchen staffing records. They compared Thu Waste GPS pings with transfer station scale tickets and route sheets annotated heavy, quiet alley. They placed the hinge invoices, both stamped Thursday, beside the handwritten note fragment. Close softly, no Thursday noise. According to official records, the first formal ballot split on the homicide counts: not guilty / undecided / guilty in uneven ratios. Abuse of a corpse, tampering, consumer fraud, reckless endangerment, and nuisance trended toward consensus faster. The foreperson suggested a test. If the state's case were missing any one category, lab, logs, GPS, edits, invoices, would the remaining pieces still point the same way? The room worked the exercise. Columns held. One juror, who had been most skeptical of the lab phrasing, wrote replicated twice beside both protein memos and circled it once. According to official records, at 6:11 p.m., the jury asked a legal question: whether John/Jane Doe homicide counts require identified victims. The court answered in writing, no. The law permits charges where identity is unknown if other elements are proved beyond a reasonable doubt. A second note asked whether intent may be inferred from conduct where no confession exists. The court replied, yes, intent may be inferred from circumstantial evidence when supported by the totality of admissible proof. But what happened next defies any logic, because logic expects the final movement to be dramatic. It was quiet. The foreperson requested the storage unit audio once more. The court allowed the limited play. Vent hum, a periodic click compatible with a dimmer. On, off, On, off, timestamp to a Thursday. The jurors stared at their grid as the sound traced a metronome across the room. When it stopped, pens moved. Boxes changed. A column labeled Thursday Routine received a single line. Admitted parts, pattern. According to official records, at 7:58 p.m., the jury signaled it had reached verdicts on all non-homicide counts and substantial agreement on the homicide counts, requesting an additional 30 minutes. The judge recalled counsel. The gallery filled. Public health staff took seats behind a pillar, out of view. A bailiff placed the banker's boxes where the clerk could reach them. The hallway clock was loud enough to measure. Some believe the truth was buried forever, but the record now had a timetable that ordinary life could hear. Wednesdays past midnight. Thursdays before dusk. Hinges that closed softly. Bins that weighed too much. Spreadsheets that learned to say extra. And labs that read the same cautious line twice. At 8:26 p.m., a note appeared at the courtroom door. According to official records, it read, "We have reached verdicts." The court reconvened. The foreperson took the paper in both hands. The judge asked the question that always sounds the same and never means the same thing twice. The answer came. The clerk unfolded the forms, and the room, trained for procedure, braced for the weight of words that belong not to rumor, not to fear, but to a week measured as evidence. Wednesday, then Thursday, after Thursday. According to official records, the courtroom reconvened at 8:31 p.m. The judge asked the question he asks in cases that hope to be ordinary. Has the jury reached verdicts? The foreperson said yes. Paper changed hands. The clerk read, on consumer fraud, guilty. On tampering with evidence, guilty. On reckless endangerment, guilty. On maintaining a public nuisance, guilty. On abuse of a corpse, guilty. Then the counts that carried silence like a weight. Homicide charged under John Jane Doe placeholders, guilty. The defense requested polling. Each juror, by number, answered the same word. The defendant stood without sway. The gallery did not applaud. Courts do not accommodate applause. The judge thanked the jurors in the language people use when there is no thanks large enough. He set sentencing 4 weeks out and ordered a pre-sentence investigation with victim impact statements to be collected under seal. Public Health extended clinic hours and added a second hotline shift. The city attorney filed for permanent revocation of the restaurant license and nuisance abatement on the alley lease. A small notice went up in the window the next morning, closed, a word that in other contexts promises a later open. Here, it promised only boards and a lock. But what happened next does not submit to any logic, because logic supposes that a verdict answers why. It did not. The pre-sentence report stacked pages: criminal history, minor, employment, reliable, financials, tight, cash heavy, mental health screening, guarded, jail conduct, orderly. A victim witness advocate collected statements. Some were one line long. Others, typed in all caps, refused punctuation. The court kept them sealed and summarized themes in a memorandum that used the smallest nouns and the least adjectives available to law. According to official records, sentencing was scheduled for a Friday morning. The state argued consecutive terms on the non-homicide counts and life without parole on each homicide count. Defense asked for concurrent sentences, cited age, absence of prior violent convictions, and uncertainty in identification. The judge spoke from notes. He referenced routine as a weapon, repetition engineered to conceal conduct, and the architecture of concealment. Hinges, bins, edits, quieted doors. He said the word Thursday once and did not need to say it again. He imposed life without parole on the homicide counts, consecutive non-homicide terms, and restitution ordered into a fund that could not replace names with numbers. The defendant asked to speak. According to the transcript, he said he ran a business and reduced waste and served what people wanted. He did not use the word the file had learned to use. The court did not ask him to, The bailiff moved his chair back 2 inches to clear a path. The cuffs clicked softly. Procedure resumed its gait. Some believe the truth was buried forever, and some of it will remain under cash drawers, in erased clips, in gaps where receipts should be. A cold case unit reopened files whose last entries read left town, unreachable, no leads. A waste hauler policy changed from a memo to a rule, seals logged, GPS mandatory, driver training on odor reporting. The City Council passed an ordinance requiring transfer station sampling protocols when heavier than standard manifests recur. Restaurants complained in editorials. They complied in practice. According to official records, the premises were abated under court order. Crews removed the equipment. A crime scene team returned for items deemed not probative before, but now collected for civil proceedings. Ledgers with empty lines, a clipboard of thaw schedules with Thursdays circled even where ink had faded, an invoice stamped silent close that had fallen behind a file cabinet. The landlord replaced the rear door. The new hinges were loud by design. The storage unit was emptied, inventoried, and closed. The box with the cassette recorder and tapes was returned to evidence long-term. The DA's office declined to release audio publicly. The court's limited admissibility ruling stood. A civil judge in a parallel case described the tapes as context only and turned the page. The page after that was redacted. Paper keeps rhythms of its own. But what happened next defies any logic, because logic imagines that communities heal by announcement. They don't. A counseling clinic kept chairs open 3 nights a week. Calls to the hotline shifted from "what did I eat" to "how do I stop thinking about what I ate?" Public Health issued a final bulletin. No infectious risk identified. Mental health resources continued. It was medicine for an injury that does not bleed. Reporters filed retrospectives in a tone that pretended distance. A podcast promised the definitive story, and then learned what courts already know. Definitive stories are made of exclusions. A neighbor sold the house next door after replacing a fence. A server enrolled in night school and did not list prior employment on applications. A dishwasher took the morning bus that passes the boarded restaurant and looked away by habit, not principle. According to official records, appellate counsel noticed an appeal. Sufficiency of evidence on homicide counts without named victims. Admission of protein spectrum testimony. Scope of digital forensics. Cadaver dog alerts. And the Thursday timeline as narrative prejudice. The state filed an answer citing replication, limiting instructions, and the principle that patterns built from admissible parts are admissible as patterns. The appellate court calendared argument for a date that read, on the docket, like any other weekday. The law's weeks keep their own weather. Public memory did what it does, simplified, then complicated, then set like concrete. A rumor about secret menus was addressed on city letterhead. No such finding. An online map tagged the block with a pin and a title that the court had already ordered stricken from captions. A volunteer painted over the pin on a printed copy with a thick blue line. The act changed nothing. It helped anyway. Some believe the truth was buried forever. Others insist that the verdict exhumed it. The record offers a colder sentence. The truth was organized. It kept hours. It favored Wednesdays past midnight and Thursdays before dusk. It wrote itself into spreadsheets and taught doors to close softly. Moved along GPS routes and signed cash receipts with no name. It survived because routine survives. It failed because routine leaves calendars behind. According to official records, the case file remains open to amendments if identifications mature. The clerk's office stores the banker's boxes by week. WED edits. Thursday pause, Thursday waste, lab food contact, lab residence. A librarian's neat hand added a 6th label, sentencing. The hinges on the archive door squeak. No one oils them. The building that housed the restaurant will become something else. A clinic, an office, a story with a plaque, or a space with no marker at all. The alley will keep its angle to the sun. The transfer station will log weights. The waste hauler GPS will ping on Thursdays because Thursdays are real. And the rest of it, the why that verdicts do not answer, will sit where courts cannot reach, between appetite and habit, in the quiet hours after kitchens close, when a city that preferred neatness learns to listen to hinges that do not close softly anymore.